Thanks. We're going to keep this short and sweet, so it's been a very long day. You did. So you all should have made an aeroplane, right? Yeah, and you should have put a joke on there. Have you done that? Hands up who's done that? Oh, brilliant. Okay. So what we're going to do is after 3, I want to throw an aeroplane at the today's guest. And I want you guys to catch an aeroplane, and then what we'll do is read a joke from the aeroplane, in whatever style you want, okay?
Unless it's really inappropriate.
So after 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so I think I'll start this one. So, fighting for peace is like screwing for virginity.
Man walks into a bar, says ouch.
Yeah. 2 fish in a tank, one sits together. How'd you drive this thing?
Doctor, I feel like a pair of curtains.
I've got an aeroplane, so I'm going to punchline. Pull yourself together.
What do you get if you cross a sheep with a kangaroo? A woolly jumper! What's Freud's favourite joke? Your mum!
Why do Marxists only drink herbal tea? Because proper tea is theft.
Yeah, okay, it's just a joke. 2 drums fall off a cliff. It's good, huh? Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're just going to open, just for a little while, just going to open up some questions to our guests. So, has anybody here got a question they want to ask somebody?
Can someone please read my joke? It's the pig one.
All right.
What did the banana say to the vibrator? What? I should have read this first. Oh, what did the banana say to the vibrator? What are you shaking for? She's going to eat me.
That was naughty. Have you got quite big in this place, haven't you? You're big run the place?
But it is the only joke I know.
Oh, okay, we've got the raffle, fantastic. Okay, so actually I've got raffle tickets, so hey, you with the red top on, do you want to come up here? Yeah. Okay, what's your name?
My name's Tippy.
Tippy, wow, that's amazing. Okay, so you can choose any raffle ticket you want there. Okay, read out the number.
293.
So 293. I hope it's not mine, that'd be weird.
Oh, me!
You work here? What's your name?
Lucinda.
Lucinda, well done, there you go. Thank you very much, Tiffany. Okay, has anybody got a question for our guests? Oh, come on. Yes.
It's sort of to you and anybody else. So many of the very great comedians were very melancholy and suicidal. And what gets the feeling, would you say if they had done your laughter therapy workshops, they might not have ended up killing themselves?
Maybe they were on the wrong side for laughter. So they got to laugh at their own joke.
Okay, so laughter is a release. So imagine if they hadn't have had their comedy and their humour, how they would have coped. So their laughter enabled them to cope.
But
So
they obviously didn't cope.
they cope better because of the laughter.
Well, I think, well, my theory is that it's other people, the audience love the jokes, but I don't think the comedians, like Lenny Bruce or Woody Allen, think their own jokes are very funny. Well, it's
It's
often
often part of comic delivery to not laugh. If you're a deadpan comedian, the whole job is to not laugh.
Yeah.
So you spend your whole life trying not to laugh at your own jokes.
I think like what the first criteria of performing material is that you have to find it funny yourself. Yeah, but I'd say that I think a lot of comedians have are so into comedy because they're often a little bit manic.
Yeah.
So they have ups and downs. So that would be mine.
Mark Saul, one of the greatest stand-up comics of the 1950s, thought everything was funny, and he was right.
Hey, I've got a show there. Yeah, that's so easy.
Mark Saul.
Yeah, go on, ask your question. I've got
Go on.
I've got a theory as to why I think this is. Because I think, I think that comedy, when you say something's a comedy, it's not like saying, oh, you go to the theatre so you haven't got judgment about it already, because like theatre is sort of neutral, or art's sort of neutral. When you call something a comedy, you're essentially calling it a good, like you're already sort of pre-describing that it's going to be funny, so if it's not, then you feel like a failure if you don't hear a laugh. So I think, to answer this lady's question, if you're a comedian and you rely solely on the audience always shouting in the form of laughter, you're good. Like, if you don't get it enough, it can be worse than if you were never in the situation in the first place. You see what I mean? Yeah. So you're putting yourself out there, not like in the theatre you could have a silent audience and you'd be like, God, they really respect my play, but secretly everyone could be hating it. But in the comedy you need constant laughter, which is constant affirmation. If you don't get that, then it's worse.
And also, even if you do get that, when you come off stage and then you don't get that, sometimes
that's true.
I think sometimes comedians find it difficult to deal with because that's like an immediate adrenaline and approval. And
in relation to laughter, one of my grandsons, when he was pre-verbal, he used to say to his mum, I want to speak to grandma, so he'd call me, she'd dial, and he was like 18 months to 2, that sort of age group, and I'd say, hello kiddo, how are you? And he wouldn't speak very much, but I'd say, shall we do laughing? And then I'd start laughing, a fake laugh, and then he'd start copying me, and before long we were laughing for real over the phone. So then he got to the point when he was bored and his brother was at school or whatever, he would call me to do what I call to do laughing. He's now 10 and is training with Arsenal Academy. The one other thing I've noticed is that my 28-year-old son and a grandson who's not his child, when I come into the house and they're both there, they're both laughing exactly the same to Family Guy. Now this is a 28-year-old and a 10-year-old, and they're both laughing exactly the same. So there's whatever that is that tickles them, it tickles them exactly the same. It's the tone of the laughter and the body, from the belly laughter. Whether it's rude or not, I don't know. Family Guy, but whatever it is, it relates to them 28 and 8.
I thought it was interesting when you said, now look at other people, and then you were saying about how when you look at others, that's part of the process. Is it kind of contagious in a way?
Okay, so
help with other people laughing?
okay. At the end of the session, we might do a laughter meditation. Okay. A laughter meditation is about making the laughter sound until real laughter comes up. And if you fake the laughter for 5 minutes and then you just relax, you'll find laughter is coming up and you're releasing all sorts, you don't know what it's about. And sometimes, to get you going, you look at other people because it's contagious. Sometimes you listen to other people, so you lie on the floor with your eyes closed and just the sound of laughter. Sometimes, laughter is a social interaction. Even if we do it on our own, we associate laughter with social interaction. If we do some sort of yoga or breathing or meditation, we can do that on our own. Yoga and breathing takes us deep inside to an inner stillness. but the laughter deals with the social interactions and the emotions involved in relating to other people on the outside. So they are quite different. What was your question?
It was kind of the interaction between you and your grandson, and that was the
2-year-old
sound.
was
But
really
then there's
getting
also
it.
the two over declarations, laughing at the same time.
So there are two things. First of all, if you laugh at comedy, then if they were watching the same program in different rooms and they both laughed at the same thing, then you say they have a very similar sense of humour. If they're in the room together, then maybe one kicks off the other, because laughter, it does things in our brain. There are things called mirror neurons. We tend to copy a yawn, we tend to copy a laugh. If someone is yawning, we may want to yawn. If someone is laughing, we may want to join in. So there are things we're programmed in our brains to laugh with each other.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
And gesture towards the many sketches and stand-ups that made us laugh today. Just since the topic of today's conversation is a comment darkly, do people see laughter as something that's inclusive or exclusive? I mean, surely so much of the laughter we experience is at the expense of something.
We always try not to. We're not big fans of comedy that sort of picks on, a group or. God, I'm just hoping none of our sketches did that. I don't think that it has to be at the expense of somebody else. It can just be a laugh at a situation that is incongruous or ridiculous. I don't think it necessarily has to have like a target.
No, yeah. But you can do the things that we do all day that are seen as normal, and why are they normal? And if you're analysing that, like, we do stupid things, like as humans, and you can laugh at that. It's just everyday things like laughing.
I suppose I'm drawing attention to the fact that there's more than one type of laugh.
Of course, yeah.
I love jokes about the disabled, but they're not for everyone. Take it off the podcast, just a joke. But no, I think the purest comedy is when people are sharing about themselves, or and so they're the target, or they're the thing, and they're being very truthful and honest. I think that's.
And something that's really noticeable in Johnson, the two Johnson plays we looked at this morning, that actually the comedy in Johnson tends to work precisely along the lines that you're talking about.
And Malvolio.
And Malvolio, yeah. It's picking on the outsider. And one of the interesting things about laughter is it forms a really powerful group identity. But not being in that group is a really interesting feeling as well. And I know I accidentally ended up, I was working, this is why I was there, at a Jim Davidson performance where a whole auditorium of people united in laughing at things that I found really, really uncomfortable, and it made it even worse that I wasn't part of that group. And Johnson's comedy seems to work along those lines almost always, and the end of every scene is a really horrible kind of experience as well as being funny, I think, for that reason.
Sorry, I just want to make a point about Jim Davidson, because there was something really bonkers that happened, I think it was last year, where Jim Davidson wrote and directed his own play. Did you hear about that?
Yes.
And it was really interesting because the play was in, I think it was Catford, and it obviously came from his money, he funded it. But he'd written this play about, it was obviously autobiographical, it was about a 1980s artist who had been misinterpreted. And it was about him and his relationship with a younger comedian. And weirdly, it didn't get great reviews, but it did get reviewed, and he did open this kind of debate about what was acceptable and what isn't. And there were these quite academic reports on this play, which I thought was really interesting. Did you see that?
He was with a black comedian, wasn't it? Yeah. It was a joint show. No, it was south somewhere. I think that was right. He's in the show. There's a lot of criticism for the There's lots of criticism for the other comedian, wasn't there? That he'd done it because it was sort of validating it.
Yeah.
So he had a lot of hard questions to answer in the press.
But then I think Lenny Henry's performance at the Jubilee was incredibly racist. I don't know if you saw that, but Lenny Henry got up on stage right towards the end of the jubilations, and he started to do his stereotypical impression of a black guy, the ganja smoking Rastafarian, and you think, you're the most racist black guy ever, you know. And it's quite weird, isn't it, with those 80s comedians? They've got to a certain age and they've become acceptable in a certain way, and then now they're just completely bonkers, aren't they?
Well, he started out in the black and white minstrel show, didn't he, as the only actual black person on it, really, but that's true. But I wonder if a lot of, there is comedy of incongruity, where it's just like, oh, it's this thing in this place where you wouldn't expect it. And sometimes that's just absurdist humour isn't necessarily aggressive, but I think a lot of kind of right-on comedy is also aggressive. It's about Daily Mail readers being wankers, but there's still a target. If you watch the sort of happy, smiley, nicey, tell you how to live your life, Russell Howard kind of comics, there's kind of this constant, there's still a punchline. The term punchline comes from an act of aggression. And it's still going to be this straw man person we don't like who's illiberal, this Daily Mail reader, what a cunt. But there's still always going to be, or often going to be, an element of aggression. And when racism was taken out of stand-up, suddenly there were lots of ginger jokes. And the original ginger stereotypes were Scottish people, Irish people, and Jewish people. So,
but then what Lou's saying is that I think sometimes the best kind of comedy is when that target is like yourself. It's you know, you're laughing at yourself and therefore like your place in the world. So I think that's.
And also if you can like what you were saying about the different kinds of laughter, and then sometimes you're laughing at someone. I think that you're right. It is funny sometimes to laugh at someone, not with them. And like we used to have a sketch where everyone in the group was just being horrible about me and bitching about me on the stage. And it was really funny, and people used to really laugh because they were saying real things about that you could tell
Then
about
she
me.
came on and was really nice,
Yeah.
and like done a big birthday surprise or something.
Yeah. So if you can like twist it, then I think it can work. And if it's like observational comedy as well, then it could be seen as being horrible because you're sort of picking up on something that's truthful. But doing sketch or stand-up or anything on stage, you're able to twist it again, so it's more interesting.
And that tension is right there in some of the plays we were talking about this morning as well. I do think at the end of Twelfth Night, that line, I'll be revenged on the whole pack of you. If you've been laughing at Malvolio all the way through the play, and then we see a human being actually heartbroken leaving the stage, it's sort of, it moves the goalpost in a really interesting way. And it's not necessarily funny anymore.
There's no way a slasher movie sequel where you
yeah. Well, someone's written
13th Night.
Tim Crouch has written a play called I, Malvolio, in which he does precisely that. He does a monologue at the audience, and he accuses you of being complicit in his victimisation, of being people you've laughed at 12 nights. It's really interesting. It's just a monologue.
Got another question there at the back?
Sorry, I came halfway through, guys. Sorry to you guys over there with the Johnson stuff. I missed it. But just out of interest, with the Lady Garden and Lou, do you, your stuff isn't very political, but do you ever get? I quite like political comedy, and the idea that we were talking about, that you kind of laugh at any situation. So I think it's quite strong when you talk about really serious stuff. And then, do you ever get tempted to do political comedy, or is that right?
It's really hard.
It is really hard.
Yeah. And it's like getting the right tone. Like you don't want to be preachy.
Yeah.
And
We did have a sketch that we fucking loved. Sorry. That we loved. That was really sort of quite dark, and it was about, we were sort of talking about the tragic books that people write. You know, people write tragic autobiographies.
Yeah.
And it was basically a sketch about that and how some
like media exploits people who've been abused and stuff.
But because it was about that kind of topic, it was really hard to get the tone right, get people to actually laugh.
And it never was right.
And then it didn't perform in
Yeah.
time.
But yeah, I think sometimes when if you set out to be political, it doesn't end up being very funny. That's what we do. That's what we do. When you just get on stage and you're like, yeah, this is also wrong. And people are like, oh, that's not really funny. So I think I would hope that like anything that we're angry about or interested in politically would kind of be reflected maybe indirectly in what we do. So for example, like the sketch that we did at the start, the girlesque one, I guess you could see that as political in that it's kind of trying to upset the idea of women as kind of these kind of sexy, burlesque people and showing someone who are useless at it. But yeah, I guess we don't really. We did try and do some sketch. We did this one sketch once about the BNP, and literally it was the worst thing. No, Lou. It was dreadful.
I wrote about female mutilation, genital mutilation and stuff, and it was great, but it's hard. Then you've got to think of your whole persona, and I'm trying to do more of that, like talk about stuff that really matters to me. Because I saw Simon Axton's TV thing on BBC. It was only on for a week or something. It was amazing, and he talked about all the things I really want to talk about, even ayahuasca and stuff. And I was like, wow, he's made it funny. And so yeah, it's something that I want to do, but nothing beats the fishing rod. I think maybe maybe I'm supposed to do the silly stuff. I don't know. It's hard to know. It's hard to know. No, like it takes. I think it takes. Louis C.K. says it takes like, 7, 8 years, 9, 10 years even to be funny, and then another 10 years to talk about stuff that you really care about. So I'm ahead of the game.
One thing that I really miss is the irony is almost entirely out of fashion. You go back to Mark Twain, or much further forward, Will Rogers, there are no punchlines. And there's hardly any laughter. There are broad, ironic smiles. And Mark Twain, when his obituary was published prematurely, and his comment was, the reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated. I miss that.
Yeah, it's very
Okay. Back there, thank you.
Yeah, just on the back of what you just said, as a fan of the wry smile, I'd love to just hear from whoever would like to say anything. Just what you think comedy is. I personally don't know if it exists. And, it's so funny in such a short space of time with all these hilarious people. We've kind of touched on genital mutilation and quite dark things, and it hasn't taken very long to get to that point. So there's obviously something so swirling and dark potentially at the centre of what is funny. And I know that if I go into an art gallery to look at art, I feel comfortable because I'm wanting to walk around and potentially be affected by certain pieces and not so much by others, but that's something personal to me. Whereas if I walk into a stand-up gig or something like that, I do feel the chunks rising in my throat. I feel quite nervous at what's being asked of me. And I don't want to feel like that because I might find it absolutely hilarious, but I just wondered what you thought comedy was, whether it exists. Are we just talking about drama? Because when something's funny, as I've seen in everyone today, it's always when someone sort of had a key into something that's been quite profound or funny, like the deep fried vitamin, something very serious, deep fried. Is it that? Is it the juxtaposition of a serious thing and a ridiculous thing, or what do you think?
They all have in common, whether it be a piece of art or a lecture or comedy or whatever. And I think Vanessa Redgrave put this beautifully in an interview. She said, "The arts stop the world from rotting." And I've always loved that, in the idea that everything we do, which is completely bonkers, whether you're making jokes or you're making humorous work or politically challenging work or whatever, it's non-conformist. It's making people think, and laughter does make people think in whatever form. And I think that's something we all share. You're making somebody stand outside of themselves, question themselves being in the world, and we need that, especially now. Europe is becoming more right-wing. We're having problems here in this country, but if you go to the Netherlands, for example, I know the Arts Council and the Film Council have suffered here, but in places like the Netherlands and Belgium, you can believe what's going on out there. So what we do collectively is so important. And I just want to finish my rant with one thing, and it's a quote from George Orwell, and he said, every joke is a tiny revolution.
Yeah.
I think it's been a really long day, and thank you all for being here. We'd now like to play some really nice music at the back there, hey? They look really psyched. We've got two great DJs, and they're going to put on some really good vinyl, and the bar is open. And I would like everyone to give a round of applause to all of our guest speakers. All of our volunteers, without whom this would have been absolutely impossible. So can we give all of our volunteers